In this video, we are talking about 10 studs and duds in week 7 of fantasy football. Quick disclaimer, this is not a start-sit video, but rather players that I am either higher or lower on based on consensus rankings. Starting with my first stud, Devonte Smith, who is a top 10 play for me at the wide receiver position this week and is the wide receiver 11 in fantasy points per game on the year. Smith has earned a 25% target share, 38% air yard share, 33% first read share, while sporting 2.4 yards per route run and averaging 75 receiving yards per game, along with scoring 14 plus fantasy points in every game this season. And with Giants stud corner Deonte Banks likely shadowing AJ Brown, it's going to put Smith in a lot of good spots, and he should be a target hog, especially with Dallas Goedert, tight end, potentially going to miss this week as he's dealing with that hamstring injury in a game that could be high scoring. And the Giants have allowed the 8th most PPR points per target and 11th most receiving yards per game to perimeter receivers. So I really think that Smith is going to have his best game of the season in week 7. On to my first stud, and it's David Montgomery. Yes, I know. Montgomery has been on an absolute heater right now as he scored a touchdown in every game this season, putting him at RB8 in fantasy points per game on the year. He ranks 16th in carries, 13th in red zone touches, 4th in total touchdowns, while averaging 4.7 yards per carry. He's been fantastic, but he faces a tall task this week against the stout Minnesota defense that's coming off a bye, so they're well rested. And let's get this out of the way really quick. I talked about it before. No, you are not benching Montgomery, but I do think he underperforms in week 7 as the Vikings have allowed the lowest explosive run rate and second lowest rushing yards per game this season. So I love David Montgomery. Don't get me wrong. I just think this is going to be a big Gibbs game out of the backfield. He's going to catch a lot of passes. So you're starting Jameer, you're starting Montgomery, but temper expectations for Montgomery. And I do think Jameer does have a solid outing because of how he can rack up fantasy points through the passing game. On to my second stud, Malik Neighbors has missed the last 2 games due to a concussion, but looks like he's ready to return this week. And Neighbors has just been so fun to watch. He's only a rookie somehow. He seems like a seasoned vet at this point. He's the wide receiver 1 in fantasy points per game and has scored at least 23 fantasy points in every game over the last 3 weeks, along with averaging a whopping 15 targets per contest over that span and a ridiculous 47% first read share. He's been Daniel Jones's favorite target by a mile, and Daniel himself has looked pretty solid this year coming off a torn ACL, and the matchup is fantastic against the Eagles in what could be a high scoring affair. And Philadelphia is allowing 11.9 yards per reception, which is the 5th highest total in the league. So you're starting Malik Neighbors. I just think he's going to be the best receiver of the week. He's going to be the wide receiver 1. He's going to have a monster performance, and it's really nice to finally have him back into your starting lineup. On to my next stud. It's Brandon Aiyuk, and it's hard to defend Aiyuk anymore at this point. I vouch for him. I'm like, it's going to turn around, and it just hasn't. He's the wide receiver 51 in fantasy points per game. He has not lived up to that massive contract that he held out all offseason and then signed days before the season started, as Brandon only has 1 game where he scored double-digit fantasy points, and his target share has been very inconsistent on a weekly basis. Plus, he only has 3 deep targets on the year 3. San Francisco just isn't using Aiyuk the same way that they did last year, and I'm not really sure why. And this likely only gets worse once Christian McCaffrey returns, because it's just another guy that's going to have to share targets, touches in this offense. And I just don't see it turning around in week 7 against the Kansas City Chiefs. They have a really good corner, lockdown corner in Trent McDuffie, who's probably going to be on Aiyuk a lot in this one. And Kansas City has allowed the 4th fewest PPR points per target to outside wide receivers. So I think it's another tough game. I'm not saying sit Aiyuk, but you got to be real with yourselves at this point. He's going to have these big splash games, but I just don't think that happens in week 7. On to my next stud, Kiron Williams is proving all the haters wrong as he's doing exactly what he did last year. Absolute domination, 85% snap share on the season, a touchdown, and 14 plus fantasy points in every game this year. He's LA's workhorse on an offense that should only be getting better as they get more healthy. Some of their offensive linemen come back. Cooper Kupp might return this week. Puka Nacua eventually will be back. Now, Blake Corum still does need to be stashed in all leagues, and I think Corum does get a nice rookie post-bye bump in his usage, but right now it's the Kiron show until further notice, and he's my RB1 on the week, facing off against the Raiders, who have been horrible against defending the run. They just let Najee Harris run for 106 yards, got into the end zone, 7.6 yards per carry. Like, Najee Harris, not a bad back, but he's not great either. Furthermore, Las Vegas has allowed every running back that they've faced, every starting running back that they've faced this year to score 15 plus fantasy points. So expect Kiron to just win you your matchup this week. He's going to go nuts in week 7 and is going to be the RB1 on the week. On to my next stud. It's Brian Thomas Jr. coming off his worst game of the season, scoring only 5.7 fantasy points. Yes, it could have been a much bigger day. Lawrence missed him on probably what would have been a 40-yard reception. And then later in the game, Brian dropped what would have been a touchdown. So not great overall. That all being said, BTJ is a budding superstar in this league. But being on a bad offense with not a good quarterback, very inconsistent quarterback in Trevor Lawrence, you are going to get these up-down performances. I think we get another down game from the rookie in week 7 against the New England Patriots, as he's likely going to see a lot of Christian Gonzalez, another lockdown stud corner who's really shut down a lot of superstar receivers over the past couple of weeks. So he's one of the best shutdown corners in all of football. So you're starting Brian Thomas Jr., but I don't think he has a big game. On to my next stud, Brock Bowers. He is going to be this year's Sam Laporta at this point. He's probably going to finish as the tight end 1 overall on the year, especially with Devonte Adams now with the Jets. And even when Adams was still in Vegas, Bowers was already eating. And check out some of these numbers. Through 6 weeks, Bowers leads all tight ends in targets, receiving yards, yards after the catch, along with ranking second in fantasy points and yards per route run, and has earned a whopping 22 targets over the last 2 games. Bowers has also scored 16 plus fantasy points in 3 out of his 6 games. Like, you don't get these type of numbers from tight ends, from the tight end position. Bowers is a different breed. He's pretty much a wide receiver playing tight end. He's incredible. He is the Raiders offense going forward. So you can expect double-digit targets for the rookie every single week. And it just keeps getting better for Brock as he gets a really juicy matchup in week 7 against the LA Rams, who have allowed the second most fantasy points per game to the tight end position. So if you got Bowers, kudos to you. He's locked into your tight end 1 spot for the rest of the year. And if a tight end can be a league winner, which they typically can't, but Bowers is going to be one of the best guys in fantasy at the end of the year when we look back, and one of the biggest steals in all of fantasy drafts. On to my next stud, Bucky Irving, another really good rookie. He's the Bucs' most talented back at this point, but is stuck in a messy 3-headed backfield with Rachaad White, Sean Tucker. I will say, I don't mean to toot my own horn, but White was a major fade for me this year because of Bucky Irving. I thought there was no way that Tampa Bay was not going to get Bucky on the field, because last year White dominated all the running back touches. I just didn't think that that was going to be the case this year, and it's not. It's very clear that White is not the best back anymore in Tampa Bay, and Irving has made the most of his opportunities as he ranks 2nd in explosive run rate, 5th in missed tackles forced per attempt, and 4th in yards after contact per attempt. And this Bucs offense as a whole has really surprised. They are looking like one of the best units in all of football right now. Who would have thought that? Not me. Baker Mayfield is playing out of his mind. And for this week, with not really knowing how this backfield is going to shake out between Irving, White, and even Sean Tucker, who looked really good last week, and on top of a really bad matchup against a stingy Ravens run defense, but I'd be tempering expectations not for just Irving, but for this entire Tampa Bay backfield, as Baltimore has allowed the fewest rushing yards per game. So it's a bad matchup. We don't really know how the touches are going to shake out. I don't mind benching Bucky this week if you have a better option. On to my next stud. It's Zay Flowers. The 2nd-year breakout is here, and man, has it been really nice to see. Flowers was one of my favorite draft targets this offseason. Everyone was like, no, he's not going to get it done with Mark Andrews in the lineup. Look at the splits. Everyone was bagging on me for being like, these splits with Mark Andrews on the field compared to, they're terrible. No, I don't look at how it's shaking out. Mark Andrews is not even on the team at this point. Like, he doesn't play. He did have a nice game last week, but Zay Flowers is clearly the alpha for Baltimore in the passing game, as Zay has hit 7+ receptions, 110+ receiving yards, and 19+ fantasy points in each of his last 2 games. He is playing out of his mind, and in 4 competitive games this season for Baltimore. So they've played 6 games, but 2 of those they were winning by double-digit points early in the game, and they didn't really have to pass. But when Baltimore needs to throw, they are looking for Flowers, as he's seen at least 9 targets in all of those 4 games that were competitive, that were close. And I'm expecting another big game this week against Tampa Bay, who we just talked about. The Bucs can put up points. They can put up points through the air on this Ravens defense. It's going to be high scoring, which means Flowers is going to have another big-time performance. And the Bucs are also allowing the 6th highest points per game to wide receivers. So get Flowers in your lineup. He's going to be in your lineup, but expect huge things from the really talented receiver this week. And to my final dud, it's Jordan Mason, who has been one of the best backs in the NFL this year, as he currently ranks 2nd in the NFL in rushing yards with 609 yards. Yes, he's currently dealing with that AC sprain and has been limited in practice so far this week. If Mason suits up, let's say Mason was healthy, I would still be worried about him. You're starting him. Remember, this isn't a start-sit video. You're starting Jordan Mason, but temper expectations. It's going to be tough sledding against this Kansas City run defense, who has been sensational, as they've only allowed the 2nd fewest rushing yards per game to running backs, along with only allowing 3.7 yards per carry, which is the 4th fewest in the NFL, and have shut down almost every single back that they've faced, including holding Derrick Henry to 46 yards. They've also held Bijan Robinson to a pretty pedestrian performance as well. So if you can pivot off Mason, we don't know how much work he's going to get with this injury. Unless reports come out that he's going to be a full go, then you're starting him. But I would be a little bit hesitant because of the injury and the brutal matchup. That's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. If you took away anything from the video, if you could please like the video, subscribe to the channel. It helps me out more than you know. And I will see you in the next one.